Welcome, dear listener, to this gentle corner of rest. Here, every story is told softly, slowly, with care woven like a warm blanket to calm the heart and ease the mind. Tonight, we bring you a tale of light and hope, a story born from silence and snow, carried by wings of fire and peace. This is the Phoenix of Eternal Dawn, a sleep story of rebirth and warmth. Let the rhythm of the words guide you into calmness. Let the quiet images of silver rivers, soft stars, and a bird made of dawn help you drift deeper into peace. You do not need to hold on to every word. You do not need to follow each scene. Simply breathe gently, listen softly, and let the story carry you into dreams. Snow lay over the valley like a quiet prayer. It softened the roofs, the stones, the fences, and every sleeping field. Wind moved in long, slow breaths across the plain, lifting pale dust from the drifts and setting it down again with care. The river, once bright and quick, hid beneath a clear lid of ice, its voice hushed to a faint murmur. Stars kept watch in the deep sky. The moon rested low, a silver bowl of light turned gently toward the earth. The village breathed as one creature. Chimneys sighed thin threads of smoke. Doors stayed closed. Windows glowed with small, careful flames. Inside, people gathered close. Old hands warmed young fingers. Quiet words passed between them, like cups of broth. Simple, steady, and kind. They spoke of stores to be stretched, of wood to be split, of paths to be cleared when the sky allowed. They spoke softly because the night asked for softness. In the very center cottage, beside a banked fire, an elder mended a woolen sleeve. The needle rose and fell. The thread drew through with a whisper. Beside the elder, a child traced frost feather patterns on the window with a breath, then watched them fade. The elder smiled at the little cloud, at the tiny miracle of warmth. Gentle, the elder said, not as a command, but as an invitation. The child nodded, and the cottage returned to its peaceful rhythm needle. Thread, breath, ember. Beyond the houses, the fields were wide and white. Stalks of last year's grain poked through like careful brushes, each tipped with a pearl of snow. The orchard trees, bare and still, held the moon in their branches. Even the sleeping beehives seemed to listen, their wooden walls wrapped in straw, their secret summer humming held deep within. A lone owl crossed the lane, wings slow and sure, as if measuring the silence. Each beat of air sounded like a page turning. The cold had been long, longer than anyone could remember. Seasons had blurred into pale variations of the same gray. People counted time by the height of drifts, by the way the sun lifted and lowered like a lantern in a far window, by the creak of frozen rafters. Yet life continued in small, bright ways. Bowls of snow melted on stoves for washing. A sprig of dried lavender shared its last. Soft scent, bread rose slowly under blankets, a quiet promise of warmth made edible. When the wind paused, one could hear the ice itself. It sang in slender tones, faint and silver, as the river shifted beneath its glass. The sound carried along fences and into door frames, into rafters and beams, until each home seemed strung with harp strings. The village listened and learned the music. It was patient music. It was winter's hymn, sung not to scare, but to remind. Stillness has a voice. On certain nights, when the fire was steady and the sky very clear, the elders told a story. They did not call it a tale or a dream. They called it a memory, though no one could say whose memory it was. In the story, a bird of light once flew over the valley. It was large, but not frightening, bright, but not harsh. Its feathers held sunrise the way petals hold dew. Where it circled, frost let go. Where it rested, seeds remembered their names. The elders did not promise that this bird would return. They simply set the memory down like a lantern between them and let its soft halo warm their faces. Children fell asleep to that memory. So did the tired and the busy and the quiet-hearted. In the deep hours when the coals were red rubies and the moon was a thin coin, they dreamed of feathers like dawn and of gentle heat blooming in the palms. They dreamed of water finding its voice again. They dreamed as the snow outside took on a faint, blue glow, as if moonlight itself were practicing to be morning. One evening, the wind arrived from the far hills with a different touch. It was still cool, still clear, but there was a roundness to it, a kindness, as though it had rubbed itself against something warm before entering the valley. Curtains stirred, sleeping dogs lifted their heads. The elder with the needle paused and looked at the window, where frost had formed tiny rivers and stars. The child noticed too. "Listen," the child whispered, not to the wind now, but to the quiet between gusts. What they heard was absence, the small absence of the ache that lives behind the eyes in a long winter, the small absence of the tightness that lives in the chest when one is always bracing for more cold. It was not heat, it was not yet change, but it was gentleness, and gentleness is the first door. The night deepened its blue. Over the fields, the owl returned to its pine with a low, steady glide. In the orchard, a single branch released a dusting of snow that fell in slow, bright sparks. The river gave a longer sigh, as if shifting under a lighter blanket. Nothing broke, nothing rushed. The village remained itself quiet, careful, kind. A mother in the lane tucked wool around a sleeping baby and opened her door to the sky. It was as if the stars had taken one step closer. She stood in that cool light and felt something ease at the base of her throat. She did not speak. She did not need to. A neighbor across the lane opened a door as well. The two exchanged a nod like a bow. The bow meant, "We are alive. We are listening. We are ready for small good things." In the barn, straw held pockets of saved summer. The cows breathed white ropes of cloud into the air. A cat moved like smoke along the rafters and settled above the warmest stall. The barn's wooden heart ticked softly beam. Joint, peg counting time with the trees and the hidden stream. In that slow ticking, the people of the village felt a companion. Time could be a friend. One kept this gently. As midnight approached, a fine veil of haze formed at the valley's rim. It caught the moon and made a halo over the far ridge. The halo widened by a breath, then rested. A breath, then rested. It was easy to miss, and many did. But the elder at the center cottage, the child with fingers against the glass, the mother in the lane, the neighbor at the opposite door, the owl in the pine, and the river beneath its window of ice, they all noticed the way the light breathed. No one named it. Names come later. First comes the simple awareness, the soft rising of attention, the hush that gathers when the world is about to show a secret. The elder set the mending aside. The needle lay across the folded sleeve like a silver quill. The child leaned closer to the frost feathers. Breath met glass. Ice flowers bloomed, then slowly cleared. The land held very still. The sky waited, silver and quiet. And somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the curved bowl of the valley, beyond memory and the long, pale years, something like a spark turned in the dark and began to glow. Morning never truly came in that season, only a paler shade of night. Even so, inside the cottages, the small flames endured, steady and soft. When chores were done and the sky leaned back into its deeper blue, the elders gathered the children close. Steam rose from cups of nettle tea. The scent was simple and green. Old hands wrapped around warm clay, and the quiet room became a harbor. The elder, with the silver needle, laid it aside and cleared a gentle space on the table, as if making room for an unseen guest. "This is not a tale," the elder always began, voice low and even. "This is a memory." The words felt like a blanket placed across shoulders. The children settled. The adults listened too, though they pretended to mend, to plait rope, to rub wax into boots. In truth, every ear bent toward the same soft place. They remembered a time before the long winter, when rivers spoke in bright voices and bees stitched gold songs across meadows. In that remembered time, a bird visited the valley, a bird of warm dawn. Its wings were wide and bright, but never harsh on the eyes. Its feathers were the color of embers at rest. When it passed, hoarfrost let go like a sigh. When it paused, seeds inside the soil stirred as if hearing their names. It did not speak with a mouth. It spoke in light, in warmth, in wind that felt like a friendly hand. The elder traced a slow circle on the table with one fingertip. It flew here once each year, they said, when the moon was thin and silver and the mornings tasted of new bread. The children smiled at that new bread, warm bread, bread that breathed. They could almost taste it. In the corner, a kettle whispered. The fire answered with a small, approving crack. On nights of memory, someone always brought out the old shawl, a faded length of wool, edged with tiny stitches in sunrise colors. No one knew who had made it. No one dared unweave it to learn. The shawl held threads dyed with marigold and honey and the pale blush of apple skin. When draped across a lap, it felt like hands. When held close, it smelled faintly of summer windows and washed stone. The children touched the edge and felt something like courage, something like quiet joy held in cloth. Why did it stop? One of the older children always asked, though the answer never changed. The elder smiled at the familiar question and let silence rest for a beat. Outside, the wind turned the eaves into a soft instrument. The river beneath its pale lid hummed a thin silver tone. Not stopped, the elder said at last, only hidden, like the sun behind a gentle cloud, like a seed under snow. Not gone, waiting. Waiting became the word that stitched the room together. The listeners breathed in and out with it, waiting like a slow tide, waiting like a candle that does not flicker but stands. The legend taught them to see with patient eyes. If a pane of ice showed a trapped blossom caught from autumn, they did not grieve. They blessed the flower and blessed the clear glass that kept it safe until the thaw. If the wind carried a scent of pine or jarred loose a cone rattling with seeds, they understood. The valley still held the map of spring within it. There were other fragments, too, offered by other elders, each memory like a bead, strung on a quiet cord. One spoke of a morning when the bird rested on the highest rock, and the stone glowed as if lit from within. Another remembered light, soaking into the river so deeply that trout wore tiny flames along their backs for the length of a heartbeat. Another pointed to the orchard and said that, after the bird's passing, blossoms once opened at twilight, each petal a soft lantern cupping silver air. Whether these were true in the strict way or true in the deep way did not matter. The room felt warmer when they were told. The heart felt steadier. The night felt thinner. Between memories, the elders taught small songs. The songs had few words, mostly hums. They rose like breath and fell like leaves. They asked nothing. They commanded nothing. They were gentle loops of sound to keep company with the kettle and the slow tick of the beam. The youngest child, who liked to press a palm to the window and draw short lines in the frost, learned the simplest refrain. It went like this: soft light, quiet light, stay. The melody was only 3 notes, but those 3 notes seemed to polish the dark. Not everyone believed. Some listened with the polite faces kept for old stories, kind, distant, careful. They stored the shawl in cedar for safety and called that enough. Yet even those held by doubt did not leave the circle. Not in such weather. Doubt can still be warmed by tea. Doubt can still be soothed by a silver hum. The legend was like a common quilt. Some brought fabric, some brought thread, some brought only the memory of warmth, and still a covering was made. Days passed on their slow, pale feet. The halo over the rim of the valley appeared on some nights, vanished on others, then appeared again. The elder did not point, did not insist. They folded the shawl with reverence, smoothed its edge, and placed it back in its wooden chest. "Memory is a candle," they said to the child at the window. "We do not press it to the glass. We set it back a little so it can glow." When the weather softened by a breath, the villagers walked to the river bend, where the current ran a shade darker under the ice. They stood in a hush and listened. Water made a thin ringing sound there, a distant bell, silver and bright. Someone, without speaking, placed a small stone on the bank as a marker. Someone else brushed snow from a dried wildflower head and admired the fragile architecture. The children tested the air with mittened hands, learning the subtle grammar of cold, the difference between sharp and soft, bitter and clean. At dusk, smoke rose straight the way it does when wind sits down to rest. The sky gathered the first easy stars. The elder lit a candle not for light, but for company, and placed it on the sill. The tiny flame and the silver moon greeted each other politely through the glass. In that tender meeting, the elder saw again how the phoenix, when it came, never demanded awe. It simply made awe possible. "Will we forget?" the child asked, cheek against the cool pane. The elders shook their head. "No," they said, "not while we keep telling, not while we keep humming, not while we keep noticing the quiet." They lifted the shawl once more and laid it over both their knees. It made a soft ridge like a horizon. "And if we ever forget," they added, "the river will remind us, the moon will remind us, the wind will remind us. They are all parts of the same gentle lesson." Night deepened. The kettle clicked and grew still. The candle breathed. The halo over the ridge widened by a finger's width, then rested. In cottages up and down the lane, people drew closer to one another, not out of fear, but out of habit and hope. The legend moved among them like a friendly hand on each shoulder, light as a bird's settling weight. It did not hurry. It did not insist. It waited with them, silver and quiet, like dawn folded neatly inside a single feather. Twilight lingered like a soft ribbon, blue upon blue, silver upon silver. The valley held its breath. Roofs wore their pale caps. Fences traced quiet lines across the fields. The river hummed under its clear glass, a thin song of moving water. In the orchard, bare branches cupped the evening like careful hands. A hush spread from door to door, as if the village had agreed to listen to something small and far away. It began as a point no larger than a pinprick, set low on the line of the distant ridge. At first it seemed only a brighter star, gently misplaced. The elder noticed it while trimming a wick. The child noticed it while polishing a circle in the frost with a sleeve. A mother in the lane lifted her face to the sky and saw the point hold, then tremble, then hold again. Its steadiness was not stubborn. It was patient. The glow did not pierce. It breathed, a slow pulse, like a sleeper's chest, in and out. With each quiet swell, the air felt rounder, kinder. Doors opened, mittens pressed to lips, boots found their way to thresholds. The village stepped out one by one and stood in the softening cold. No one called. The light itself was the caller, and the caller asked only for attention. Across the fields, the snow responded first. A faint blush moved over the drifts. Not red, not gold, but the tender color of coals under ash. Icicles along eaves kept their clear edges, yet inside, a thread of warmth began to dream. The river's song lengthened by half a note. The owl in the pine lifted one wing, then settled it again, as if giving its own small blessing to what was coming near. The point grew to a pearl. The pearl grew to a lantern. The lantern opened a quiet petal of light, and in that petal a shape gathered, something curved, something winged, something ancient as morning and gentle as a hand upon a brow. The elder did not name it. The child did not shout. Names and cries belong to other hours. This hour was for wonder, and wonder prefers soft steps. Neighbors drew close without meaning to. Shoulders touched through wool and fur. Breath rose in little clouds and drifted toward the same place on the horizon. The glow brightened, then rested. brightened, then rested. It seemed to be learning the valley's breath, matching it, entering its slow rhythm. The halo that had hovered for many evenings now took on color like dawn, mixed with moonlight, a pale gold washed with silver. "Look," the child whispered, and then did not speak again. The whisper was not instruction, it was gratitude. From the ridge, a slender ray reached out like a finger, dipping into a bowl of milk. It touched the highest tooth of ice on a fence post. The tooth shone, then softened, then held a perfect drop that did not fall. In the orchard, the oldest tree, gnarled, dependable, patient, caught a fold of the light upon one of its bare forks. Frost scales loosened and slid away in a silver drift, revealing wood the color of warm tea beneath. High above, the shape unfolded further. Wings, but not like the wings of hawks. These were wide with calm, layered like petals, edged with a light that did not glare. Each feather looked as if it remembered sunrise. Between the wings, a quiet heart of fire glowed steady, even, kind. Around that heart, the air moved in soft currents, and those currents drifted over the valley with the fragrance of warmed pine and clean stone after rain. The villagers stood very still. Stillness was not fear, it was reverence. The elder's hand found the child's mitten and rested there. In another doorway, a carpenter's palm brushed the shoulder of a weaver. Farther down the lane, a shepherd lifted a sleeping toddler against a shawl so the small ear could face the sky. The toddler sighed in that deep, trusting way of children who feel safe. Safety, tonight, was simple. It was the sky's new light, meeting the earth's old patience. Somewhere near the river bend, a narrow seam in the ice widened by the width of a reed. Water, finding the seam, lifted a soft blue breath to the air. A trout turned beneath and flashed a silver line that caught the glow for the length of a heartbeat. The sound of the current, bright, bell-like, seemed to greet the growing light with a small, joyful yes. The point became a presence. It crossed the ridge not with speed, but with grace, and entered the bowl of the valley, as if stepping into a familiar room. Snow accepted it, stones accepted it. The old shawl in its cedar chest seemed to warm by memory alone. The presence paused above the far meadow and hovered. The light it carried did not fall in a sheet. It drifted down like seeds from a cottonwood, like thistle silk, like the first flurries of a kindly storm made of warmth. As the drifting light touched the meadow, stems that had stood all winter in quiet endurance lifted their thin heads a fraction. Not a bloom, not yet, only a loosening, a remembering. The villagers saw the change and felt their own chests loosen in answer. It was a small motion, but a whole season could turn on such emotion. The heart knows this. The heart keeps its own calendar. Closer now, the shape resolved. A curve of neck like a river bend, a crown of subtle flame that leaned and breathed as a breeze moves through wheat. Eyes deep and luminous, holding not heat, but depth, the kind of depth one sees when looking into a pool at dusk, when fish and leaf shadows share the same quiet water. The wings gave one slow beat, and the beat moved through the valley like the calmest tide. The elder bowed their head just a little, the way one bows to a friend one has waited long to see. The child lifted both hands without knowing why, as if to feel the touch of the light upon the wool of their mittens. Along the lane, there were no exclamations, no questions, only breathing, only listening, only the gentle adjustment of bodies leaning toward warmth. Above the orchard, the presence turned, and with the turn, its feathers sent out a circle of pale gold. The circle rolled over rooftops, over fences, over the barn where the cat stepped down from the rafter and curled on warm straw. It rolled across the frozen river, and the ice sang a clearer note, bright enough to make eyes shine. It rolled into the forest edge, where it found a sleeping fox and laid a soft glow upon its fur. The fox did not wake. It dreamed of sunlit grasses. For a time that did not need counting, the village and the presence regarded one another. Recognition does not ask for words. It asks for quiet courage, for open faces, for hands at rest. The glow answered the gaze of each watcher with a tenderness that felt both new and old. New like the first cup of tea on a cold morning, old like the slow, steady beam that holds a house through many winters. Then, as evening deepened toward night, the wings drew a fraction wider, and a path of light extended from the sky to the earth. Not a spear, not a ladder, but a ribbon, wide, soft, shimmering. It touched the farthest, oldest tree at the village edge. The tree received it the way a harp receives a hand. A chord rang, low and sweet. Frost slipped from the branches like quiet bells. No one moved to claim this moment. It was not for claiming. It was for keeping. The villagers kept it by standing together in the clean cold, by letting the glow rest on their faces, by letting their hearts make a little more space. Over the ridge, stars arranged themselves with extra care, as if to frame the scene. The moon, patient and mild, watched with approval, and the first spark, now a gentle presence, carried itself lower through the silver air, toward the waiting tree, toward the edge of the village, toward the open hands and steady breath of people who had learned to listen to the quiet. The ribbon of light lowered with a patience learned from rivers. It unspooled through the silver air, wide and soft, shining like moonlit silk. The oldest tree at the village edge, gnarled trunk, kind posture, a listener through many winters, waited with open branches. Frost clasped every twig in tiny stars. Lichens slept like pale maps along the bark. Beneath the tree, the snow held a smooth, quiet bowl where deer had once stood to watch the fields. The presence drifted closer, wings like layered petals, breathed in a slow rhythm. Open, gather, open, gather, sending gentle tides of warmth across the lane. Each feather held a memory of morning, peach at the root, gold at the edge, a trace of silver between, as if dawn and moonlight had decided to share a home. The heart within glowed not with blaze, but with kindness. A steady ember one could cup in both hands. The eyes were deep, clear, and calm, the color of tea held to the light, the color of quiet water that remembers stars. When the phoenix settled upon the highest fork, the branch accepted the weight with a soft creak, grateful rather than strained. Frost loosened in a shimmer and slid away in tiny bells, bright and delicate, ringing once as they fell into the nest of snow, where claws light as reeds, strong as roots touched the wood. The bark darkened to the tone of warm bread, and a thin thread of steam rose, not harsh, but gentle as breath on a window. The first warmth touched faces. It did not rush. It arrived like dawn crossing a sill. Cheeks blushed, noses tingled. A tender ache the villagers had forgotten they carried eased at last, like a knot dissolving under a kind thumb. People exhaled together, a soft hush moving through the lane. Some closed their eyes to feel the light more clearly. Some opened them wider, wanting every detail. Children reached out mittened hands to the air and laughed, the small, surprised laugh that sounds like a brook, finding a stone and curling around it with joy. Icicles along the eaves of the nearest cottage grew glass clear, then clouded from within as slender streams formed and thought about moving. A single drop gathered and hung, perfect and round, holding the lane upside down inside itself. It fell. It landed on the snow with a faint, friendly tick. That tick carried farther than one might expect. It reached the barn and the orchard and the river bend. It reached the elder's chest like a knock from a remembered guest. The phoenix folded its wings a little, enough to make a low arch of shelter. Light pooled beneath the arch and spread in a soft circle around the trunk. In that circle, the snow thinned to reveal last summer's leaves, pressed flat and sweet, still holding the warm scent of field and Sunday. Steam twined up in slender threads, silver in the moon glow, gold in the phoenix glow, and disappeared with a sigh too quiet to name. No one spoke. Silence was not emptiness. It was full. Footsteps eased closer, careful on the softened crust. The elder stood within arm's length of the pool of light, hands folded over the old shawl, now draped across their forearms. The child stood beside them, breath making small clouds that dissolved the moment they entered the warmth. The elder bowed, not low, not grand, just enough to say thank you without asking for more. The child mirrored the bow, eyes wide, mitten lifting an inch in greeting. The tree, long a watcher, became for a moment a singer. A tone came from its trunk wood note, root note pleasant and round, the sound a barrel makes when tapped to see if it is sound, the sound a well makes when a pebble kisses its surface. The phoenix inclined its head, and the tone settled deeper, as if the tree had remembered a song it learned when it was a sapling. Heat moved outward by breath and by thought. It rode the soft wind and found the faces of those still in their doorways. It slipped into door cracks, warmed the edges of window panes, loosened the star-like flowers of frost that had grown there. Patterns changed. Ferns unfurled. Feathers relaced themselves. Rivers of ice redrew their bends. On a sill, the small candle met the new light. Flame greeting flame. Their two halos overlapped, and the room behind the glass took on a color like honey poured thin. In the orchard, crystals that had wrapped the twig tips like tiny shells became pearls of water. The pearls did not fall at once. They shivered, listened, then let go in slow beads that pattered onto old leaves. Somewhere beneath the snow, a seed woke enough to turn over in its sleep. Not a sprout, not a push, only a deeper breath. That was enough. The land keeps count of such small things. The river lifted its voice to a brighter key. A long seam opened in the ice, a ribbon the width of a hand, and a faint mist rose where water touched air. The mist carried the smell of cold stone and pine, warmed by Sunday trout turned. Their backs flashed for a heartbeat, like coins at the bottom of a well when a single ray finds them. Then they quieted again, slow and peaceful, letting the current do the carrying. The phoenix's feathers shifted, whisper on whisper. With each small movement, warmth rippled like rings on a pond. The cat in the barn stretched along a beam and stepped down to nestle in straw that no longer felt like glass. Cows rolled cud in steady peace, their breaths less sharp, their eyes half-lidded with relief. A fox slept on, unaware, but its dream changed from the gray of thickets to the pale gold of meadowlight. The elder unclasped the shawl and lifted it in both hands. The stitches, dyed long ago with sunrise hues, met the phoenix's glow and seemed to drink it. Threads brightened, faded marigold became fresh marigold. Apple skin blush deepened. The elder laid the shawl across the lowest branch. Cloth and bark touched, and for a breath, the whole tree looked clothed in dawn. The elder smiled, a small, tired smile made new. No voice spoke, and yet a lesson arrived the way warm air arrives under a door. It said, gentle first, gentle before bright, gentle before strong. The villagers felt their shoulders drop, their jaws soften, their hands uncurl. They had not known how tightly they held against the cold. Now they knew, and knowing was its own loosening. Children, brave with wonder, stepped to the edge of the warm circle and knelt. One pressed a mitten to the revealed leaves and felt their soft ribs through wool. Another held out a tiny cup carved from a nutshell and caught a drop from a melting icicle, then sipped it as solemnly as tea. It tasted like clean stone and sunlight. A mother watched with wet eyes and did not wipe them. Tears can be warm. Tears can be soft. Tears can be prayers without words. Above, the phoenix lifted one wing a finger's breadth and set it down again. The gesture was like a benediction. Snow further off settled in a hush, losing its sharp glitter for a gentler glow. Stars drew closer, crowding the bowl of the sky with their quiet faces. The moon wore a wider halo, as if pleased. The warmth did not devour the cold. It conversed with it. Edges blurred. The air became round, balanced, calm, breath by breath. the village learned the new weather of the heart. Not summer, not yet, but no longer the old winter either. A third thing, made of patience and promise, the kind of weather in which people speak softly and mean it, in which doors hinge open without complaint, in which kettles hum at a lower, kinder pitch. The phoenix blinked once slow, thoughtful, bright, and the blink passed through the lane like a ripple of peace. Behind the watchers, fires settled and gave off steady heat. Above them, thin clouds formed and drifted like milk, poured into dark tea. The elder touched the child's shoulder, and the child rested their head against the elder's sleeve. The village stood as a single quiet body, held by a single quiet light. When at last the branches bore no frost at all, the tree looked years younger, though its wisdom remained. Steam ceased, drops became beads, became threads, became the memory of rain. The glow around the trunk widened by a step. The villagers did not cross. They honored the circle by keeping it whole. To stand at its edge and listen was gift enough. So the phoenix, perched upon the withered tree that was no longer withered, taught its first lesson without a word. Warmth can arrive as a whisper. Light can land like a bird. Hope can brush the face before the mind has time to name it. And in a valley that had known only the long white hush, the first touch of gentle heat became a story the bones would remember. A promise placed quietly under the tongue, a beginning folded into the soft wings of a calm, eternal dawn. Morning did not arrive as a line. It arrived as a circle. It began at the old tree and moved outward in soft rings, like ripples from a pebble slipped into a still pool. The phoenix lifted its wings a little no-show, no blaze, only a tender widening, and the glow at the roots loosened and flowed. Light slipped over snow like warm breath over glass. The first ring touched the nearest fence and paused there, listening, then went on. Where the circle passed, edges softened. The knife-bright glitter on the drifts turned to a quiet sheen. The air, once thin and sharp, rounded into something the lungs welcomed. Steps that had crunched now sighed. Shadows lost their hard lines and took on the color of honey. It was not a sudden summer. It was a gentle agreement between cold and warmth, a treaty signed in silence. The phoenix did not move far. It breathed. It blinked. It adjusted a feather here, a feather there, and each small kindness sent another ring of light. The rings overlapped and interlaced, as if weaving a blanket across the lane. The elder, still at the circle's edge with the child, felt the glow settle through coat and shawl and into bone, where it met a long, patient ache and eased it. Their sighs rose in white ribbons that thinned, silver, and vanished. Icicles along the cottages awakened by degrees. Some held, pearled within. Some let go a single tear. Others leaned toward one another, clicked in a soft, bright greeting, and then fell in pieces that chimed as they met the softened snow. The chime carried down the lane like a bell, played with a gloved hand. Windows cleared in slow ovals. Faces appeared gentle shapes, gentle eyes framed by the steam of indoor breath. Doors opened with small gasps as tight latches found themselves no longer brittle. The circle found the path to the well. Its stones had kept winter without complaint, a stack of gray shoulders bearing the weight of frost. Light needed those stones. Frost retreated in lace. The wooden bucket, stiff with cold, relaxed its hoop and sat more comfortably on the lip. When the rope was lifted, fibers sighed and did not splinter. The water below, protected by its roof and stone ring, sent up a cool, fresh smell, clean, quiet, deep. Across the yard, the barn took a breath. The cat, now a stripe of contentment in straw, turned slowly and became a circle too. A lowing sounded from the far stall, not anxious, not demanding, only a greeting to the new weather of the heart. Dust in the beam of the door floated like tiny planets in a slow dance. The circle of light rolled across the threshold and made those planets shine. At the river bend, the seam widened by the width of 2 reeds. Water gathered itself with gratitude and moved a shade faster. It spoke a word in its thin, silver language. a word that meant yes. The word touched willows asleep under snow, touched stones that had waited with patience, touched the soft, buried ark where crayfish dreamed. A small cloud rose from the water and drifted along the bank like a thoughtful visitor. The phoenix looked toward the cottages. With one slow sweep of its wings, it sent a higher ring, one that lifted as well as spread. The ring brushed eaves, lifted a hat of snow from one, then set it down again, reshaped into a soft dome. It stroked the bell rope that hung by the tiny chapel and made the rope sway once, just enough to ring a single note, clear, kind, small. People smiled. Even those who doubted smiled. Families stepped into the glow. A weaver reached out and held her open palm in it, as if testing rain. A carpenter opened both hands, palms up, as if receiving a gift. A shepherd knelt to tie a child's boot and found the leather supple, no longer like stone. A baker unwrapped a cloth from a small loaf and watched the crust drink the light until it looked almost warm again. They broke a piece and shared it, and it tasted gentle. Children made a game of the rings. They walked to the edge and stepped in, then out, then in, measuring the shift with delighted faces. In the ring, breath felt soft. Outside it, breath felt sharp. Back in, soft again. Small boots drew pattern after pattern. The snow took these signatures with gratitude. The way paper welcomes careful ink, laughter rose. Not loud, not wild, but bright. It sounded like chimes carried on a friendly wind. The orchard accepted the circle with old grace, twigs lifted by a finger's breath, as if remembering a posture from spring. On the bark, lichen brightened from pale to peregrine. A single, distant bud, still tight as a lentil, loosened a whisper. The whisper traveled along the branch, a silver thread. It was not a bloom. It was only a thought of blooming. Thoughts can be nourishment. Thoughts can be seed. Neighbors met at the gentle boundary, where one ring gave way to the next. They exchanged nods and soft words. Peaceful, someone murmured. Soft, another answered. They did not speak of plans. They spoke of noticing. The air tastes like stone after rain, said one. The wind is round, said another. My chest feels quiet, said a third, hand at heart, surprised to find it true. The elder, watching, understood the shape of the lesson spreading through the lane. Warmth can be shared without being spent. Light can move from face to face and grow. The shawl on the lower branch, bright with renewed threads, seemed to pulse with this truth. The elder touched the child's shoulder. The child looked up, eyes wide and bright, cheeks pinked by kind heat, and nodded as if answering a question no one had asked aloud. As the circle reached the far cottages, it veered gently around a drift piled high by last week's wind. It did not fight the drift. It curved like a river around a stone and made a crescent of glow. In the crescent, a woman set down a pail and listened. Somewhere inside the warmth, the quiet held a note like a distant flute. She closed her eyes and let the note rest in her chest. When she opened them, the world looked simple and kind. Sparrows arrived from the hedge. Not many, only 3. They perched on the fence and fluffed their feathers, surprised to find the rail no longer biting. They shook once, twice, and then settled with the contentment of small things. One hopped into the ring and back out again, testing as the children had. It approved. Its soft sheer folded neatly into the music of river and bell and tree. Another sweep, another ring. The circle found the path that led toward the hills. It did not abandon the village. It widened the village's horizon. Far fence posts caught the glow. The line of the ridge answered with a faint golden rim. The sky drew a thin milk line along the belly of a cloud. Even the cold felt kinder, as if remembering it had once been part of spring, that it would be again, and that nothing in the world needed to hurry to make that true. In every doorway, faces softened. In every pocket of straw, a little summer returned. In every hand held to the air, sensation woke like a bird opening one eye. The village stood inside, a blessing it had made space to receive. No trumpets, no thunder, no command. Only breath, only warmth, only light moving in circles, teaching without words. When the phoenix finally lifted both wings and held them wide, the circles paused, then settled like snowflakes, finding their home. The tree beneath wore a crown of steam so delicate it looked like lace. The shawl glowed, then jangled. The river hummed its silver note in a deeper key. The bell at the chapel did not ring again. It did not need to. Evening drifted closer, peaceful and unafraid. The circle became an aura, less seen than felt, steady as a heartbeat. The villagers remained outside for a time, not wishing to step away from the calm. Then, one by one, they returned to their doors, carrying the warmth within as if cupping a small candle. The light did not stay behind. It went with them in the quiet way of true gifts. Thus, the circle of light completed its first round tree, to fence, fence to door, door to river, river to field, field to ridge, and the village learned that hope can travel in rings. It can expand without endangering its center. It can include without dividing. It can hold and hold and hold. And all the while, the phoenix watched with patient eyes, its presence gentle as snowfall, its lesson clear as dawn resting on a silver, quiet world. Morning opened like a calm hand. The sky was pale milk with a soft thread of silver along the ridge. The phoenix, still within the branches of the old tree, lifted its head and breathed a tender breath. The breath did not blaze. It drifted. It moved over roofs and fences and fields, a quiet tide that touched everything with patient heat. Where it flowed, the air became round and kind. Where it settled, the world loosened by a finger's width, then a little more. The first field felt it, beneath its white quilt. The ground gave a slow answer. The hard top crust sank with a sigh, light as a sleep-deepened chest. Mica in the snow softened from sharp glitter to gentle glow. The long, thin stalks that had stood like careful brushes, all winter bowed, then rose, then stood straight again. Between them, tucked tight and waiting, small leaves remembered their own names. They did not break the surface. They whispered, yes. The phoenix shifted one feather. Warmth deepened by a breath. A ribbon of light walked the furrows. It found a buried stone and warmed its skin. It found an old boot print and filled it with clear, shining melt that copied the sky. It found a seed husk and polished it until it looked like a tiny moon. All this happened without rush. Calm work, quiet work, work that made room. At the orchard edge, a single drop formed at the tip of a twig and swelled until it was perfectly round. It held the whole lane inside itself, houses upside down, people small and dear. The phoenix, a soft sun nested in a tree. The drop fell, touched a brown leaf, and rolled to the ground, leaving a clean thread in its path. On another branch, bark lines, once brittle, took on the sweetness of damp wood. Lichen pressed its flat hands to the trunk and brightened to pearl green. Villagers stepped into the morning as if entering a kindly chapel. Hats loosened, scarves moved down from noses to rest easy at throats. The elder held the old shawl across their shoulders and felt the stitches hum. The child walked with open palms, catching the air like soft rain, and laughing at the simple joy of warmth that asked nothing in return. Laughter stayed close to the ground, small and bright, like bells on a gentle animal. By the river bend, the seam of water widened to the width of a palm, then to the width of two palms placed side by side. The current, calm and silver, carried a thin song. Mist rose in a slender veil. It smelled of clean stone, pine warmed by sun, and something like new linen. A trout came near the light, turned once, and drifted back, content to let the stream do the work. On the banks, the willow's thin wands took a softer curve, like lines in a quiet poem. The phoenix breathed again. With each breath, warmth traveled farther, but it did not thin. It multiplied. It found the baker's hands and softened a bowl of dough that had slept under cloth. It found the weaver's loom and eased the warp, so the shuttle slid like a boat on a still lake. It found the carpenter's bench and loosened a knot in a plank that had resisted all week. It found the shepherd's path and turned ice to damp earth, brown and sweet, leaving small, shining puddles that reflected the slow sky. Children made games of light. They chased it as it moved over snow and stone, then chased their own shadows when the sun leaned in and joined the play. A girl cupped a small gleam in her mittened hands, then opened them as if freeing a bird. A boy followed the warm path to the well and leaned over the stone ring to watch his breath twine with the tender steam. They spoke in whispers, even when they laughed. The day asked for gentle voices, and gentle voices came easily. Inside cottages, windows opened a finger's width. Curtains lifted and fell. The small sounds of home's kettle hum, spoon against bowl, broom bristles whispering across wood, seemed to tune themselves to the river's silver note. A mother set bread on the sill for a moment, just to let it breathe the calm air before cutting it. The crust took on a sheen. The crumbs sighed. The slice tasted simple and good, like kindness in plain clothes. Sparrows discovered that railings no longer bit. They landed, shuffled, and announced this quiet miracle with tiny chirrs that sounded like stitched sunlight. A blackbird tested the warmed air above the field, rose, and drew a single, smooth line across the sky. Its wing beats were slow. Its body held the ease of a creature that has nothing to prove. The gift of warmth did not erase cold. It partnered it. Together, they made balance. Shadows remained, but they softened at the edges, turning the lane into a study in grays and golds. Breath still showed, but not in hard bursts, more in soft ribbons that drifted and disappeared. Even the snow that did not melt seemed to accept a gentler role, reflecting light as if it had been waiting all along to be a lamp. At the chapel, the bell rope swayed of its own accord just once, as it had the day before. The bell answered with a small, clear note that folded into the morning and became part of it. People paused to listen. Some closed their eyes. Some placed a hand on a doorframe or a fence post, grounding themselves in wood and stone while the note settled inside. The phoenix did not speak, yet message moved. It traveled in steam that rose from warmed bark. It traveled in the sweet, clean smell that came when ice met air and turned to water. It traveled in the way shoulders lowered, jaws unclenched, eyes shone. The message was simple. The world can be gentle. The heart can be soft. Warmth can arrive without burning. In the barn, straw no longer cracked like glass. It bent. It welcomed. A cow breathed a deep, even breath and flicked an ear with lazy content. The cat, a circle again, stretched into a long ribbon, then curled once more with a pleased, rumbling hum. A hen shifted on her perch and settled, feathers smooth, eyes half closed, as if listening to a lullaby only she could hear. Along the outer fence, the circle of light from yesterday found a gap and walked through it, stepping into the meadow beyond. The meadow had waited with good manners. It received the warmth like a guest it had long prepared for. Low hummocks softened. Old seed heads shed a dust of pale gold that glowed in the slanting light, then drifted down in slow, peaceful spirals. Even the quiet rocks seemed to shine from within, their wet faces glimmering like small, still ponds. Neighbors met where light lay bright on the lane. They did not rush to speak of work or weather or plans. They shared small things. "My hands feel like my hands again," said one, flexing fingers inside warm gloves. "The floorboards creaked less," said another with a smile. "The kettle sang lower," said a third, and they all nodded, pleased by the thought of a kettle choosing a gentle note. The elder watched the phoenix and felt the day choose a pace. Slow, kind, steady. They lifted the shawl from their shoulders and held it at arm's length. The cloth, fed by light, looked newly spun. They folded it with care and laid it across the child's back like a sunrise. The child stood very still, eyes luminous, hands folded, as if receiving a small ceremony no one had named. Soft, the child whispered, and the word was both a description and a blessing. Toward noon, the sun found the valley with shy affection. It moved through a thin veil of cloud and joined its gold to the phoenix's gold without argument. The two lights layered like warm water over warm water. The snow shone, the river brightened, the air tasted faintly of honey. The gift gathered itself and did not diminish. It filled corners, it filled pauses, it filled the quiet between hearts that had learned to listen. By afternoon, paths were wet with peaceful shine. Boots left dark, shallow prints that slowly filled with clear water and sky. Children sailed bark boats from puddle to puddle, guiding them with twigs, cheering softly when they touched a shore. Adults moved through their tasks with unhurried care, warmed from within by a glow that asked them to be gentle with themselves and with one another. When evening leaned close, the warmth did not leave. It softened again, the way a lamp is turned down to a soothing glow. The phoenix lowered its head and rested. Steam thinned. The river sang in a key fit for dusk. The village, carrying the day's gift inside every sleeve and pocket, prepared for night without worry. They knew the light could be shared without being spent. They knew warmth could be quiet and still be true. And under the silver sky, with stars beginning to breathe, the land held that gentle knowledge, the way a cradle holds a sleeping child, steady, peaceful, calm. Dawn unfolded like a quiet page. The sky wore soft bands of pearl and ash blue, and a tender gold waited beneath, patient as a lamp behind a curtain. The phoenix rested in the old tree, a calm ember held in careful hands. Its warmth was steady, not urgent. The village woke to that steadiness. Doors opened with little sighs. Kettles found their low songs. Footsteps pressed shallow crescent moons into damp paths that gleamed with yesterday's melt. Hope did not arrive as a shout. It arrived as noticing. A weaver stepped to her loom and touched the warp. It felt alive again, pliant, friendly, ready to receive the shuttle. She worked slowly, thread over thread, the pattern simple and kind. With each pass, she paused to look out the window. A sparrow hopped along the warmed rail, testing the world with delicate feet. The weaver smiled and set one more line. Not haste, not hunger, only the pleasure of patient making. At the river bend, the seam in the ice wrote a longer sentence. Water spoke in silver syllables, a language that required no translation. The elder and the child stood side by side, hats touching, breaths braided. They watched a small twig travel, caught, freed, caught again, and learned without being told that moving forward can include pauses. The child held a palm near the mist and felt coolness wrapped in warmth. Gentle, the elder murmured, and the mist seemed to agree. In the orchard, the oldest tree remembered how to listen with more than wood. A faint stir passed from root to branch, like a message walking a familiar road. Buds remained closed, but their quiet changed. Inside each tight sleeve, a softer thought unfolded soon. But not yet. Yes, but with care. Lichen shone like coins left in clear water. A blackbird perched high, considered the stillness, and let one slow note fall. It sank into the warmed bark and stayed there, humming. Hope is a practice, the day suggested. And so the villagers practiced. They practiced with hands. A carpenter eased a tight joint, sanded in small circles, and blew a fine cloud of dust that glittered in the slanted light. A baker kneaded a dough that rose without strain, and set loaves to rest under cloths that smelled faintly of sunlight. A shepherd mended a halter with even stitches, each one a small promise kept. Every task took the shape of calm attention. Every task became a way to carry light. They practiced with eyes. People looked for small brightness, the sheen along a puddle's rim, the way steam drew lines above the well, like fine script, the glimmer inside a drop about to fall from a twig. Children led this work without knowing. They knelt to greet beetles waking in warmed soil. They traced the softened patterns of frost with mitten tips and learned to see how ice writes poems and then erases them clean. They practiced with breath, in doorways, in fields. Beside the river, the village learned the slow rhythm of in and out that matched the phoenix's wings at rest. Worry loosened its hold on shoulders. Words came softer, kinder. Even silence grew rich, no longer the emptiness of waiting, but the fullness of being present. The phoenix did not speak. It did not need to. Its warmth taught the way a lamp teaches a room how to be welcoming. From its perch, it lifted one feather and set it down, and that slight motion sent a lesson across the fields. Hope does not scorch. It glows. Hope does not demand. It invites. Hope, like warmth, can be shared without being spent. By midday, clouds drew thin veils across the Sunday light, filtered through in gentle sheets. The world wore a soft focus, as if seen through a cup of clear, warm water. In that softened light, people noticed one another differently. A neighbor's lined face looked like a well-loved map. A child's bright eyes looked like two small lakes catching sky. The simple act of meeting another gaze felt like stepping into a sunlit patch on a winter road. At the chapel, the bell rope waited. No hand pulled it, still for a breath. The bell gave a hush of sound, not a ring, more a memory of a ring left on the air. A few villagers paused to stand with that memory. They did not name it prayer, though it was. They did not ask for anything. They brought thanks the way one brings a pebble from a river. Small, smooth, enough. The river continued its silver sentence. A wedge of ice loosened, turned, and drifted into the seam. It met the warmer water and softened at the corners, rounding, until it was a clear leaf traveling toward the bend. The elder watched this and placed a warm hand on the child's back. The child leaned into that hand and learned in that leaning that hope often feels like being gently held. In the barn, straw had the scent of saved sunshine. The cat walked its high beam like a slow comet and leapt down into the glow that pooled where the wide door stood open. A cow's breath rose, a quiet cloud that broke apart in the light and became nothing but brightness. A hen tipped her head, listened to some private lullaby of grain and dust motes, and settled more deeply, content. In the meadow beyond the fence, the circle of light from yesterday lay like a pale halo upon the ground. The halo did not move now. It rested. Rest is a lesson too, and the villagers took it in. A woman set down her pail halfway to the well and stood still long enough to feel her heartbeat find the day's slower drum. A man paused halfway through, stacking wood, and let his hands hang softly at his sides. Work would wait. The warmth was here now, and being with it was also a kind of work, the kind that builds rooms inside the mind where calm can live. By afternoon, the wind freshened, not sharp, only lively. It played along the eaves and combed the orchard in even strokes. The phoenix lifted its head to meet it, eyes bright and mild. The wind, warmed where it passed, carried scents back into the village. Clean snow, damp earth, pine, and a hint of something sweet and green sleeping under the ground. People breathed deeply and found that the air itself tasted like a promise kept. In small ways, the land answered each breath. A cluster of seed heads released a pale dust that sparkled, then settled like soft confetti. A puddle's thin skin cracked in a delicate star, water laughing silently beneath. Far up on the ridge, a line of frost lost its hold and slipped as a faint silver curtain, then was gone. Each change was minor, almost nothing, yet each one added to a feeling that grew without noise. It is possible. Evening approached with velvet steps. The softened sun leaned lower, and the village lengthened its shadows with ease. Lamps were lit, one by one, tiny suns blooming in windows. Their glow met the phoenix's glow across distances and made bridges in the air. Families gathered at tables, hands washed in warm bowls, spoons moved in quiet circles. The day closed itself gently, like a book that will be opened again soon. Before night fully settled, the elder and the child returned to the old tree. They stood within the edge of the warmth and listened to the steady talk of wind and wing and wood. Hope, the elder thought, is the art of keeping company with the gentle. The child, without words, understood. They lifted the shawl and draped it once more over the lower branch, not because the phoenix needed it, but because offerings make the giver glow. The phoenix breathed, slow and sure. The village matched that breath. Stars stepped out, patient and bright. The river sang in its silver key. Across fields and fences and rooms, small lights continued to meet and multiply, each one steady, each one kind. And the lesson of hope, quiet, daily, tender, settled into the valley the way snow had once settled, completely, softly, holding everything without weight. Night loosened its fingers from the ridge. A pale seam opened where earth meets sky, fine as thread, silver and soft. Frost breathed a last quiet sparkle. The river's thin song brightened by a note. Birds woke without hurry, offering small beads of sound to the cool air. The village stood in that hush between dark and day, held like a candle cupped in two hands. In the old tree, the phoenix lifted its head. Feathers stirred like petals in a kind wind. A tender glow moved along its wings, traveling from shoulder to tip, from root to edge, as if the bird were remembering each feather by name. The warmth it had given through the long hours of night remained a steady ember spread across roofs, fields, and sleeping rooms. Now morning came to meet that ember, to lean close and listen. The first light gathered behind a thin veil of cloud. It was not bright yet. It was a promise. Milk pale, pearl soft. It touched the curve of the hills and paused, as though asking permission to enter. The phoenix seemed to answer by breathing deeper. With that breath, the tree gave a low note from its trunk, warm and round, like a wooden bowl placed gently upon a table. Villagers stepped to their doors. Scarves lay easy at throats. Eyes were clear. Faces held a shining that was not only light, but rest. The elder stood with the child in the damp lane and felt the air turn sweet in their mouths. Steam curled from a bucket left by the well. A dog sat and leaned against a pair of boots. Across the orchard, the blackbird chose a higher branch and waited, head tilted, the way one waits at the edge of music. The seam at the horizon widened, pale gold lifted under the pearl. The sky took a long, soft breath. So did the village. Then, very quietly, the phoenix opened its wings. They opened like dawn opens, not sudden, not sharp. Feather after feather unfolded in steady rhythm, each catching the newborn light and giving it back, warmer and kinder. Heat did not strike, it arrived. It went first to the coldest shadows and made them gentle. It lay on the river seam and turned the mist a luminous cream. It touched the barn door and found the cat, who blinked once and closed its eyes again, purring like a small drum. At the crown of the wings, a flame rose. It was not fire in the old hungry sense. It was a lifting of brightness, a singing of color. Gold brushed with rose brushed with honey, honey brushed with a very soft white, almost moonlight, almost breath. The flame rose higher, thread by thread, like the first lines of light written on a quiet page. It did not leave the village. It joined the morning. Across the ridge, the sun answered. A bowl of light tipped and poured in a slow arc. The phoenix raised its wings to meet it. For a heartbeat, sky and bird and day made a single, shining shape, like a blessing drawn wide. Feathers shone, frost shone, eyes shone. The river laughed in silver. The bell in the chapel made a tiny sound all by itself. Not a ring, just the memory of metal waking to warmth. People felt the change begin inside their chests. It did not start with thought. It started with breath, then with a loosening. It felt like a window in the heart, opening toward a calm field. It felt like a hand letting go of a handle it had held too long. It felt like a cup being filled, and finding it could hold more than it had feared. Hope, already learned in small lessons, settled deeper and found its home. The phoenix lifted a little from the branch, only the weight of a leaf. The old tree swayed, easy, grateful. Light slipped beneath the bird and made a path across the orchard. A clear ribbon that ran fence to fence. Children, still and bright, watched the ribbon move and did not step on it. It was not for feet, it was for eyes. It tied the village to the ridge to the sky to something even gentler and more quiet beyond. Fields answered in their faithful way, under the soft crust, soil warmed by a whisper, and the whisper carried. Roots heard it first. Seeds turned, no push, no rush, only a turning, as if to face a friendly voice. In the puddles that had formed along the path, the light drew tiny suns. Boots left prints that glowed for a breath, then filled with clear water, then with the pale blue of morning. Inside homes, lamps were pinched, not because they were no longer needed, but because they had done their work well. Their last smoke lifted as thin gray lines and wove themselves into the quiet air like threads finishing a tapestry. Bread was broken. Cups warmed hands. Spoons moved slowly. The taste of everything was cleaner, softer, as if dawn had washed the flavors and set them back shining. The flame above the wings rose another hand's breadth, then steadied. It looked less like fire now, and more like dawn itself learning to stand. The blackbird on the highest branch let a single clear note fall, then another, then a small string of pearls. The bell rope did not move, but those who listened heard an answering tone in the wood around them. The doorframe, the beam, the table, each giving the morning back in its own voice. The elder lifted the old shawl. It had brightened in days past. Now it seemed lit from within. Colors of marigold and apple skin, honey and pale wheat, breathed as if the cloth remembered sun on shoulders and hands on edges. The elder placed it across the child's back. The child stood quiet, eyes on the phoenix, small body wrapped in warmth and light, and the calm weight of being loved. A kindness spread that had no edge. It moved from face to face, room to room, path to field. It gave and was not less. It shared and was not thin. It left and was still present. People felt it settle into the places that had ached the longest, the guarded places, the lonely places, and fill them with something gentle, something silver, something peaceful. A hush ran through the lane, and in that hush, a truth became clear without words. Dawn can live inside a person. The phoenix folded its wings partway, keeping the morning cradled. The great flame did not vanish. It eased, threading itself into the light that now lay across snow and stone. The sky grew bright enough for birds to move and for chores to begin. Yet the brightness did not feel separate from the bird. It felt woven sky to feather, feather to breath, breath to heart. On the ridge, sunlight found a thin curtain of frost on a far rock and made it glow like glass. In the meadow, old seed heads wore small halos before letting their chaff go in slow, spiraling confetti. At the river, the seam ran clear from bend to bend. Water shouldered its thin shelves of ice and did not fight. It carried them kindly, rounding their corners as it went. The village changed in small, sure ways. People greeted one another as if meeting in a bright doorway. Work felt lighter, though nothing was hurried. Even rest felt fuller, as if the day itself had set cushions beneath every task. The air tasted of pine and clean stone, and a sweetness like apple blossoms, held far in memory and near in hope. When the sun stood just above the ridge and the phoenix's glow had become part of the morning, a quiet understanding settled everywhere, like dust in a beam of light. The land was no longer barren. Even where snow still lay, Something green and patient breathed beneath. Even where ice still held, water sang. Even where hands were tired, warmth moved in the blood like a soft tide. The phoenix watched the village with mild, steady eyes. It did not claim the dawn. It married it. It did not own the light. It taught the hearts below how to keep it. People felt that keeping began. They would carry it into their rooms and their fields, into their speech and their sleep. The day would unfold under it like a calm sail under a friendly wind, and as the brightness gathered and the world stepped gently into its work, the bird of morning shifted its weight upon the branch. Its feathers whispered. Its head lifted toward the open sky. The first long climb of light had begun. Soon, when the hour was right, the phoenix would rise to join it, to stitch heaven and valley with one soft thread. But for now, it held the dawn in kind wings and let the village feel peace, deep and silver and quiet, warming them from the inside out. By late morning, the valley shone with a softened brightness, as if every roof and field had been washed in warm milk and set to dry in gentle air. The phoenix rested still in the old tree, but the day around it had grown sure of itself. The river's silver line ran clear from bend to bend. The barn door stood wide, and straw glimmered like pale gold threads. In windows, small plants kept safe in clay pots, through the long white months leaned toward the light and seemed to breathe. The villagers moved through their tasks with an ease that felt new and also very old, like remembering a song learned in childhood. They fed animals, carried wood that no longer bit their palms, swept thresholds where meltwater made little mirrors. Words were few, smiles were many. When they paused, not from weariness but to notice. A sparrow's shadow crossing snow, a washerwoman's steam drawing script on the air, a child's footprints drying from dark to light to nothing. The phoenix turned its head toward the ridge. In that small motion lay intention, like a tide changing its mind with courtesy. The elder saw it first. The child felt it a soft tug in the chest, a hush at the edge of thought. The bird would rise, not to leave, the heart insisted, but to join, to stitch sky to earth with a bright thread that could not be broken. The old tree, kindly and wise, sounded one mellow note through its trunk, as if to bless the moment. The phoenix answered without voice. Feathers brightened along the spine, a slow drift of color from shoulder to tail, gold deepening to honey, honey stirring with rose, rose touched by a quiet white that remembered moonlight. Heat grew, not hotter but wider, the way a lake grows when ice pulls back and the water takes a full breath. Villagers gathered without calling. A bell did not ring. A message moved from glance to glance, like light from pane to pane. Work set itself down. Doors leaned open. Hands, recently busy, found stillness at sides or folded together. The shepherd lifted the small one so she could see over a fence. The baker stepped out with a round of bread nestled in a cloth, breaking a piece with care, then another, passing the warmth hand to hand. The weaver drew her shawl close and raised her face. The phoenix stood. It did not leap. It lifted in the manner of dawn itself, steady, even, certain. Claws released the warmed bark with a soft whisper. Snow beneath the boughs settled. Steam made lace. With one slow downbeat, wings gathered morning and gave it back as blessing. A ring of light widened over the lane, over the well, over the river seam, gilding each with a tender yes. The bird climbed a body's height, then paused. A hush fell deeper. In that hush, sparks loosened from the fringe of feathers, small, bright seeds of fire that did not burn. They drifted outward, not hurried, not lost, as if each knew where to land. One touched the river and sank without a hiss, leaving a pearl-green whirl. One brushed a fence post and disappeared, but the grain of the wood glowed for the length of a heartbeat. One rested on the shawl hanging from the lower branch, and the threads brightened as if remembering summer hands. Sparks found the fields, They rested on last year's stalks, on the eyes of a quiet cow, on the cap of the well, on the chapel's bell. They lay on hats and hair and lifted palms. Where they touched, a warmth stayed, not hot, not heavy, just enough to anchor brightness inside the skin. People felt it take root in the quiet rooms of the heart that winter had left untended. A breath went out of many mouths at once, and it sounded like relief colored with gratitude. The phoenix rose another tree's height. The old tree swayed with it, not grieving, only grateful to have been a perch for the soft beginning of a new season. The wings, now wider than the cottage roofs set end to end, moved in a rhythm the village already knew from kettles and looms and steady footsteps. Upward the bird went, not to escape, but to enlarge the circle of warmth it had made. Above the orchard, the air turned to silk. Frost curtains along the far ridge loosened and slid in thin, bright veils. The river widened its silver writing. Mist lifted and unfurled like a banner, with no emblem but light. The cat in the barn opened one eye, approved this sky business, and returned to sleep. Sparrows rose as a single soft exclamation, then settled again along the fence, their small bodies puffed with content. Halfway to the cloud line, the phoenix turned once, slow as a clock's kind hand. The village saw the full breadth of it then. A living dawn, feathers ringed with quiet flame, eyes mild and deep, a heart like an ember made of patience. Light poured from it not in spears but in sheets, warm rain without wetness, gold without glare. The sheets drifted down and broke into smaller lights, more sparks, more seeds, each taking a place in water, wood, stone, and skin. The elder felt a spark touch the inside of the wrist, where pulse speaks. The child felt one rest on the center of the brow, cool at first, then warm. A carpenter felt one settle beneath the ache in the shoulder that winter had made sharp. The ache softened. A widow felt one come to the quiet room behind the ribs where memory sits. The quiet grew tender, not empty. No one said a word. Eyes spoke. Breath agreed. Higher still. The sky accepted the bird as a friend who has arrived to help with a great, gentle task. Sunlight leaned closer, and the two lights mingled until differences blurred. The phoenix's flame lifted from the crown and braided into the day, strand by strand, like gold thread woven into linen. The braid stretched from ridge to ridge, then beyond the ridge to places the villagers could not see, though their hearts could imagine them other fields, other rivers, other doors opening to the same soft warmth. From so high, the bird's slow wing beats sent distant ripples that the village felt, as a calmness settling into every corner where haste had once Saturday. Chores went on in that calm. Wood was stacked as if stacking peace. Water was drawn as if pouring blessing. Bread was broken as if handing light from palm to palm. The day learned how to be both bright and quiet. As the phoenix neared the thin meadow of cloud, it shook its feathers once, a motion like laughter without sound. A shimmering fell thousands of tiny motes, each no larger than a seed fruit from the alder. They drifted sideways, downward, inward. They lodged in moss, in lichen cups, in the hairline cracks on stones. They rested in the grooves of hands, and the fur of animals, and the tucked folds of shawls. They were not seen for long, but their work began at once. To keep warmth local, to make light a neighbor rather than a visitor. The blackbird sang from the high branch it had claimed, not a bright, busy song, but a string of low pearls that matched the silver river. The bell in the chapel hummed once more without being touched, a tone so soft it could be mistaken for wind through straw. From many doorways came the small sound of a cup set carefully upon a table. The village and the sky were playing one instrument now, and the phoenix's climb was part of the song. At the edge of cloud, the bird slowed and hovered. It looked down, not to hold, not to linger in regret, but to bless. Eyes like deep tea found every roof, every lane, every face. The gaze felt particular, not general, as though the bird had learned each person's name while perched in the tree, and now returned it with light. A last wave of warmth descended a soft tide that smoothed the furrows on brows, that unknotted the day before it had time to tangle. Then the phoenix tipped its wings and rose into the bright. It did not vanish. It thinned into the light until bird and day were the same cloth. For a while, one could still trace the curve of a feather by the way the cloud glowed, the arc of a wing by the way the sun wore a halo. Then even those gentle signs folded into the sky's wide, peaceful face. Silence, friendly and full, stood in the village. People kept it, not wishing to break the fine surface of the moment. The elder placed a hand over the child's spark-warmed brow and felt a steady calm there, like a small lamp in a safe window. The child touched the elder's wrist and felt the pulse under the skin, keeping time with the river. Across the lane, neighbors nodded to neighbors. Each one changed, and also the same, which is the best way to be changed. Work resumed, but now it felt like carrying pieces of dawn from place to place. Snow that remained shone with a mild heart. Water moved with a quiet confidence. Even shadow did its work kindly, giving rest to eyes and edges to things. From time to time, someone looked up, and though the bird was not visible, the gaze found comfort, as if the sky itself were a companion. And above it all, too high to see and close enough to feel, the phoenix traveled in the current of day, laying a glowing thread through hours and weather, tying noon to evening, evening to night, and night to the next soft seam of morning, so that when rest came, it would come sweetly, and when dreams opened, they would open toward light. Evening walked into the valley on quiet feet. The day's bright work had thinned to a gentle glow that rested on fence rails and window panes like warm breath on glass. Snow, where it lingered, held a soft silver, no longer hard, no longer cold in the old way, only calm, only reflective, like water that has chosen to be still. The river's thin seam ran clear from bend to bend and sang in a voice fitted for dusk, lower, rounder, peaceful. Above the ridge, the sky kept a pale band that folded slowly into lavender, then into blue, then into the tender depth where the first stars learned their names. The phoenix was not seen, but its leaving had not made a lack. Warmth lived under eaves and in palms, in pockets and in breath. Sparks the bird had sent now worked in quiet places, in the grain of door frames, in wool fibers, in the curve of a spoon, in the shallow bowls of moss along the well stones. A cup set down on a table kept heat a little longer. A loaf wrapped in cloth stayed soft beneath its thin crust. A shawl on a chair kept the wearer's shape as if it remembered the shoulders and wished to hug them again. The village carried the light the way a body carries a heartbeat. Unthinking, steady, sure. One by one, lamps bloomed in the windows, not bright, not sharp, only the kind of light that treats eyes kindly and makes a room feel like home. Children washed hands in warm bowls and watched steam drift up in milky curls. Bread was broken. Soup moved in quiet circles in wide spoons. A little honey found its way to the rims of cups. The tastes were simple and full and clean, as if the day had steeped them in gentleness. Outside, the orchard breathed in place. Branches held still to avoid startling the evening birds. A blackbird gave a last soft string of notes and tucked its head. Lichen kept its small coins polished. A single bud, tight as a button, felt the day's gift settle deeper under its skin. Not yet, it told itself kindly. Soon and softly, the well kept its cool depth and hummed a low tone that matched the river's silver song. Stones on the path glimmered like damp shells. Neighbors spoke with doorways between them, the way people do when the air itself is friendly. There was not much to say, and everything to say. Peaceful, someone breathed, and the word made other words unnecessary. A hand went up in greeting. Another hand answered with a small bow. In the barn, the cow lay down on straw, that smelled faintly of saved summer. The cat found the warmest hollow and became a circle inside a circle, purring in a key the rafters understood. The elder and the child walked the lane in shawl and cap, step for step, small clouds of breath rising and fading like soft birds. At the old tree they paused, the branch where the phoenix had rested, or a smooth dark where claws had warmed it. It looked handsome, well-loved, strong. The shawl still hung from a lower fork, its colors deepened by day after day of light. The elder lifted it down and set it across both their shoulders at once, so warmth could be shared without decision. The child leaned in, and two bodies became one warm shape against the evening. They stood and listened. Listening is a kind of prayer that requires no words. The tree offered its wood note, patient and round. The river answered in silver. Far on the ridge, a fault of frost let go, with a faint shiver that sounded like thin bells heard from a distance. From cottages came the steady music of nighttime. Spoon against bowl, chair leg on wood, a kettle's last sigh. Above, the sky gathered the stars with the care of a mother counting sleeping children. Each new light appeared with courtesy. Each held still with grace. When the first moon stepped out full enough to be generous, thin enough to be mild, its silver laid a path over the river seam and crossed the lane, climbed the well, touched the shawl, and rested on the child's quiet face. The child closed their eyes and lifted their chin to that cool blessing. The elder smiled the way one smiles at a sleeping baby, with softness that begins in the chest and moves outward like warm water. They walked home slowly. Slow makes more room for noticing, and noticing is rest. On the sill, a lamp met the moon as an equal, their two halos braided into one gentle circle. Within, the room welcomed them with the day's kept heat. The table had remembered their places. The cups had remembered their hands. The chair creaked, only to say, "I am here. I am sound." A blanket folded itself open with a whisper. The child climbed into bed while the elder banked the small fire. Coals glowed like tiny suns lined in a row. The elder set the shawl over the child and smoothed it once, twice, not to press it, but to bless it. The child watched the elder's hand and saw in the motion everything the day had taught. Gentle first, gentle before bright, gentle before strong. Eyes grew heavy. The room hummed a low, kind note that matched the one in the old tree's trunk. "Tell me the memory," the child breathed, already half asleep. The elder did not refuse. They did not hurry. They did not even raise their voice above the tone of the coals. "A bird of dawn," they murmured, "born from warmth." It flew low over a valley made quiet by long cold. It did not shout. It did not burn. It touched wood and water and skin. And where it touched, hope remembered its name. It settled in an old tree and taught the air to be gentle. It rose to the sky and left its light behind here, here, here. With each here, the elder touched the child's brow, the child's chest, the child's open palm. The child's breath lengthened. The elder listened until it matched the river. In listening, the elder's own breath slowed. Shoulders softened, jaw loosened. Thoughts arranged themselves in simple rows, as if putting tools away at the end of a bright, honest day. A small gratitude swelled and rested. The elder pinched the lamp lower, not to send it out, but to invite it to sleep. Across the village, other lamps dimmed. Curtains fell into their folds. Doors found their latch without complaint. Night creatures went about their small, courteous errands. Snow accepted the moon without glare. The wind learned a softer step and walked the lanes in socks. Even the cold behaved, doing its clean work without bite, letting the heat remain where people needed it most. In beds, in blankets, in hands tucked together between warm chests, dreams began like slow rivers. They opened in quiet meadows. They held silver water, soft grass, shy flowers, and sky that seemed close enough to touch with a fingertip. In those dreams, the phoenix was not a stranger in flame, but a companion in light. It perched on fence posts and windowsills. It walked beside those who walked. It flew above those who needed lifting. And in every scene, it brought the same message with the same mild certainty. The dawn you seek is already inside you. Keep it warm. Share it kindly. Let it glow. The chapel bell, with no hand on its rope, made a breath of sound so gentle that only those awake for love or worry could hear. Those few, upon hearing, felt their worry soften and their love take an easier seat. The sound settled into roofs and rafters, and then into sleep itself, where it became a low shore upon which dreams could land and rest. Clouds moved like slow ships across the moon and drifted on. Stars took their turns. The river wore a silver thread and sewed the valley to the sky with patient stitches. The old tree held its branch steady and kept watch, as trees have always kept watch, by standing, by listening, by remembering. Sparks worked in wood and wool and skin, unseen and tireless, making small rooms of warmth wherever breath was being made. Before the elder slept, they opened the door to the night for the length of one long breath. Cool air came in. A line of stars looked in. A piece of the moon slid across the threshold and touched the floorboard with silver. "Thank you," the elder whispered, not to anyone in particular, and to everything at once. The word did easy work, and then seemed to put itself away neatly on a shelf. The door closed. The latch settled. Silence expanded, not empty, but full of soft things. The low purr of embers, the sigh of wool, the river's quiet run, the small shifting of snow learning the shape of resting roofs. The village lay inside that silence, like a child inside a good blanket. The land held them. The sky held the land. The unseen wings of morning held the sky. Sleep came as a blessing, and the blessing spoke in a voice the heart could understand. May your breath be gentle, like water in moonlight. May your thoughts grow quiet, like snow under stars. May warmth live in your hands, in your chest, in your dreams. May silver peace fold around you, soft and sure. May the dawn within you glow through the night, calm, bright, and kind. Rest now, rest deeply. Rest in the light that will rise again.